was basically tomorrow last time we were here. Feels very hot here.
I'll call to order the Race Creek Board of Managers regular meeting. Today is Wednesday, June 26, 2024. It's 9 a.m. We are in the Shoreview City Hall Council Chambers. Let the record reflect that Steve Wagman, on prior approval, is absent today. Otherwise, we are all present. Can we set the agenda, please? Any changes?
Staff have no suggestions for changes.
Okay. I'll move the agenda as proposed.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Board minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I will move approval of the board minutes from the June 10th, 2024 workshop and the June 12th, 2024 regular meeting.
I will second that. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. None. Opposed? None. Consent agenda. I know Patrick's not here. Who do I have in the place?
You have Kelsey White.
Kelsey, welcome.
Thank you, President Bradley. Today, the district staff has 2 permit applications for the board's consideration. Both are being presented without changes.
Are there any questions of Kelsey? Not, can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move permit application number 24037, Whiteberry Yacht Club, and 24-039, City of Shoreview, for approval.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. That takes us, what, to open mic?
Correct.
Do we have anyone online? We clearly don't have anyone in the audience, so that takes us beyond open mic to the rules.
Yes. President Bradley, Board of Managers, I'll open up this item today as Patrick is away from the office. This is the district's effort on 2024 rule revision and initial comment response. We had an informal engagement with our partners on the rule, as you know. Of the 39 inquiries that we sent out, an invitation for early comments, 4 responded. Patrick provided those to you via email on June 12th. Today's agenda item, which I'll make note, is on page 27 of the packet, includes a table of comments and their responses, those 14 items. Staff modified the draft rule, as you'll see in the table, on 3 of those, based on 3 of those comments, and the others, under staff's judgment, didn't warrant a change. However, today we're here for the input of the board. If the board wishes to further consider these suggestions, we ask that you share that with us today, and when that is the case, we can adjust the public memorandum when we issue it out for official notice to maintain your ability to navigate changes in the rule. So welcome the discussion of the board on this item. Ultimately, staff is recommending that you direct distribution and response to comments out to those commenters.
So anyone have thoughts about how we proceed through this? John, do you have
Mr. President, thank you.
Is that F1?
So first of all, Mr. President, I guess I want to look at this in a little bit. The first comment that came from Forest Lake in number 1 pointed out that the metropolitan communities face numerous regulatory requirements of varying magnitude in multiple jurisdictions, and went on to talk about the costly redundancies, multiple review periods, varying lengths, excessive documentation, and that most of this already is required by state statute, as they pointed out. And so I thought that's a very important thing because, of course, we have a similar statement to that. It's in our plan, which has on 3-57, where we say rule revisions may be made to provide and reduce redundancies and to avoid overlapping jurisdictions. And so this morning, I provided to the members of the board and to Teresa for the record, a copy of page 58 and 59 from the Washington County Governance Study on water done in May of 1999. Now, I was a member of the panel, that's how I happen to remember this, and a member of this study, which took over a year to go on. And I brought that to you because if you take a look at it, it talks about natural resource inventory, land use planning processes, and enforcement and permitting. And what the county was getting at was the no need for 2 permits, double looks. That's exactly what Forest Lake is talking about here and earlier, and some of these comments are doing, the unnecessary need for this. And the district role would be more of a comment period on these and allow the cities the jurisdiction to do it, so that our rules wouldn't really be necessary. Since there isn't an absence of these rules at the municipal and county level, there's no need for the district to redo everything with the post-Toasties approach, which is, you know, post-Toasties used to advertise their cornflakes versus Kellogg's is just a little bit better. So oftentimes the district rules are just a little bit more restrictive than what, and that's what the Forest Lake comments are. So I think that when we look at rules, while we have to have them, as I've said in the past, there's no need for the enforcement and permitting area here. And that this is what the idea is, not to have 2 permits, to eliminate the need for permit applicants to get 2 permits, double costs and such, which when these guys go through this, I mean, the applicants, generally, they just pass that cost on to the new homeowners and such. So I thought that the district's role is more of advisory than, say, an enforcement, permitting, and interference with the land use process. That's what the county is pointing out here, is the land use process really drives what goes on, not the water use process driving the land.
So, interesting.
And so I think as we go forward in developing our rules, as I've said earlier, over several meetings and several months now, that there is a need for to refocus how we approach this more to a comment period rather than a permit requiring money, requiring inspections, requiring these kinds of things. And if we are going to go down that road of inspections, as Mr. President, under your leadership, and we have an arrangement with Centerville where they pay us to do that work for the cities. And so instead have the district use these resources that we now spend on this towards water quality projects.
So, John, I've only had an opportunity of 10 minutes or so to read this, but I found it very interesting reading. It starts off, though, what you haven't focused on, I think, in your comments, is that the local authority would incorporate the water resource protection standards from the Water Resource Board into their official controls in the form of land use plan, city code, or zoning, as 3 of our cities have done. These documents would reference the natural resources inventory and would include the water quality standards for designated water bodies and enforcement mechanisms. And then it goes on, it says permitting would be the responsibility of the local authority for those 3 cities. Ideally, a local authority would issue and enforce permits in those cities that have adopted our rules. The most efficient method would be have the water organization make comments during the local authority review. So if Forest Lake wants to adopt our rules into its own, it would, like Hugo, become responsible for adopting. There wouldn't be 2 permits, there would be 1 permit. It'd be from the city of Forest Lake. But they would have to first incorporate the water resource protection standards into their official controls, which makes sense. We wouldn't want the city to determine on its own what's necessary to protect our water.
Well, I disagree with you. The city does do that because we make a determination based on state standards.
Speak into the mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So anyway,
His face isn't next to my microphone.
So
So I feel it rude not to talk to him.
I appreciate that, yes.
So as I said to you, yes, you're correct that there's a need for the cities to adopt the rules. but they adopt the rules that are based on state standards, just like the Watershed District does. We adopt rules based on state standards. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the watershed rules, one fits all. We need to have the flexibility of these cities to be able to make their decisions on what's going on. So they already have a set of standards that they've adopted that didn't exist. And was that a comment?
So at any rate,
So I respectfully understand your interpretation of it, but I don't believe that necessarily means that the watershed district standards have to be adopted by the cities.
well, that's what it says here, and that is, in fact, what I believe the law would require them to do. And I believe there's a statute that says they have the opportunity to adopt our rules. Now we're here talking about our rules.
And there's also a state statute that says that watershed district rules do not apply, only apply in the absence of those rules at the city.
Right,
And
so if they adopt our
or-
rule.
So it doesn't say that the rules that are adopted by ordinance are the watershed rules necessarily. Now, before we go into having your supplemental support from our consultants, I point out to you that what we're really talking about is a lot of dollars that are involved with consultants here because they review all of this. And so they have somewhat of a conflict of interest, and I kind of put that in context for any comments we receive.
Mr. Chair?
I can't let that go by. You know, and I was a consultant to government entities for 16 years. I was a consultant providing comments to government entities for another 27 years. You know, just because they happen to be making a living doing this doesn't mean that they are not independent in their thoughts and actions, and that their positions aren't subject to reviews by severe review by the board. So,
I wish, Mr. President, that you had that same consideration for members of the board in the past. You know, we have held board members here for conflicts of interest because they have claims of them not being independent when these issues have come up. So I just make that, and I'll leave it at that and move on.
Mr. Chair?
yes,
In response to this conversation I heard, I think I have to put a picture in my mind anyway about who's responsible for what in what location. So the city, no matter what city it is within our watershed, is responsible for the work that goes on and the permits that are issued and the levying that goes on within their city boundaries. This watershed board has the responsibility to look at the entire watershed and the effects on the action and reaction of the waters and the rules within the watershed. So to the point about cities saying they're doing, what they're doing with permitting is similar to how we think about the watershed. I would say again that if they want supposedly the streamlined permitting process, then they need to adopt the watershed rules in addition to whatever rules are going on in their city. And we do have 3 communities in the watershed that are doing just that.
except for they're doing that, and one of them doing it in, I think, a very clever way. They've adopted our rules and they've said, but we want Rice Creek to enforce them, and we'll pay you for it. So are there any other specific items on F1, if not, or F2, because I have something on F3? So F3 was the comments by the city of Forest Lake, does not currently participate in cost share regulatory projects that just meet, does not currently participate in any cost share regulatory projects that just meet Rice Creek's rules. Instead, Rice Creek's policy has been to only participate in projects that go above and beyond the minimum permit requirements. Rice Creek's current position fails to consider that Rice Creek's rules already have standards that are greater than the state's standards for communities. In addition, Rice Creek's participation in regional projects that provides a benefit to the community and would help demonstrate Rice Creek's genuine intention to put its permit revenue and taxing dollars back to work for the local community. So basically, he's looking for us to help fund their compliance with our rules, and we don't currently fund that. So for example, as I interpret this, if they were going to have a project, they wanted to put in buffers, and they said, we'd like you to participate in the cost of buffers, or we'd like to build a BMP, and if we'd like you to participate in the cost of BMP. So I have proposed the staff's answer focused only on the subsidized permitting, and I went deeper. So I have handed out to you a proposal to respond to that one that says, Rice Creek Watershed District supports regional projects that address flooding and water quality through its own direct projects funded with ad valorem taxes and local water management taxing districts. It also supports these projects using its existing grant programs, e.g. storm grants, and by providing technical and financial support to external grant programs, e.g. clean water funds. Annually, the Rice Creek Watershed District sets its budget to reflect its best judgment on the amount of funding it can support for these projects without placing an excessive burden on its taxpayers. With respect to its regulatory programs, Rice Creek Watershed District has determined that it should recover 60% of the cost of that program from permits and 40% from ad valorem taxes. That cost sharing recognizes the benefits of the program to parties beyond the permit holder and reflects the best judgment of the Rice Creek Watershed District Board on the appropriate burden to place on ad valorem taxpayers versus the directly benefited property. Because the regulatory program is subsidized, the permit revenues provide no funds to support additional grants. To increase permit fees to support additional cost share grants would be contrary to Rice Creek's Water District Management Plan, and in the view of the Rice Creek Watershed District Board, would be contrary to the public interest. In other words, I don't think we should get in the business of subsidizing actual BMPs and all the things that we require under our rules in order to provide flooding and water quality protection. Open to your comments.
Well, Mr. President, I wouldn't support this.
You would not support
No.
this. You want us to raise taxes to?
No,
build
Mr.
BMPs?
President, I don't want us to raise taxes. I want us to use the money that we use for all of these rules to support best management practices and other water quality programs. I think that's pretty much what the role of the Watershed District is. And as I've said before, the local authorities, as you read the statement from the page 59 of the Washington County Government Study, will incorporate water resource protection standards into their official controls. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the Watershed District rules they incorporate in there. But my point here is that you're saying, well, we're not going to give you the money back that's collected in your community or such, per our rules. And I think that they have rules that are there in place, and therefore there's no absence of a rule, and so we would be subsidizing the rules that they have adopted as a city.
I remember when White Bear Township came before our board and asked for grant money to clean out a BMP just off of Bald Eagle Lake, and you pointed out that that was a maintenance function, that there was their obligation to maintain their BMPs, and you, along with Barb Hockey, successfully voted that down. And so remember, we all have histories. So.
No doubt we do, Mr. President.
So, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, what you have done here with this response, do you want to replace that as the comment?
Yes, that would be my proposal.
Okay.
President Bradley,
Yep.
if I might offer a comment.
Sure.
The communities of Hugo, Mounds View, and Circle Pines, as you know, adopted the district rules, the standards, the thresholds that we sent. Point of clarification, Centerville did not adopt our rule. We just have a relationship with them in regards to inspection. But further, and more important, the state's MS4 permit. So the PCA said everyone in the state, all public entities, Rice Creek, all of our cities, are obligated to obtain and abide by an MS4 permit, which is the the floor, the minimum standards. All watersheds have studied, and Rice Creek extensively, the needs of the watershed in being successful in its efforts for water quality and flood control. And from that, in working through time, you've developed the rules to address that as best possible. The rules are an important aspect of the district being successful in that, meeting those goals, along with your programs and, of course, projects to fill in the blanks. As you know, we started from a point of fully developed communities that had no regulations at the time of development or forethought of the implications of creating impervious surface in the runoff. And here we are today trying to fix that. So I think my important point here is just that the MS4 permit is a minimum standard. The district's identified the importance of some additional standards and thresholds that work to meet your rule. In the computations of your engineer, that's been found to be valuable in accomplishing the goal. I'll stop there.
So, Mr. Chair, Nick, where do you see the city? I mean, the city rules are somewhere between MS4 and Rice Creek, or have they adopted MS4? How?
No one per se adopts MS4. It is a mandate by the state, and you show how you're meeting the minimum control measures, and you obtain a permit from the state based on that submittal, and then you're obligated to report on it.
Okay, so, but cities have the ability to add additional rules. They can't go below the MS4, but they can add on. So cities can add on to some additional requirements, just like the watershed can add their pieces to it.
I would say that's generally correct. The district, as a watershed authority, and your obligations under 103D are to set the standard for the watershed, and thereby unifying all of the municipalities or portions of them that are within the watershed to be successful in that watershed-based management.
But there's no requirement for the cities to adopt the Rice Creek rules, but they still have to have their permittees then get a permit from Rice Creek. I'm just trying to figure out how it would flow here.
The landowner intending to undertake a project that triggers your rules is obligated to come to the district. We have very good relationships with our community where there is dialogue back and forth, where
And then
many landowners, will go through this once in a lifetime, if you will,
Right.
the mom and pops. There's others with consultants, but so we have pre-application meetings and such to help them usher through and what the obligations of the district are regarding water quality and flood control, et cetera. Municipality, land use authority, and how far the setback, traffic controls, all those types of things.
So,
And then
go ahead, I'm sorry.
review for me again the cities that Centerville is, say what you said again. So it's Mounds View?
Yep. Let me back up maybe to a little bit further. In the watershed management plan, you've laid out the protocols by which a municipality may take on the regulatory authority, adopt the district standards, and it's laid out, and we have the protocol and paperwork, I'll say, in place to do so. 3 of your communities have done so. City of Hugo, long time self-administration of the district's rules, Mounds View, and Circle Pines. Centerville, recognizing that periodically both the district inspector and the city's inspector were present, said, well, if you good folks at Rice Creek will cover the inspection. We will pay you to do that. That is inspection of stormwater management is one of the state's categories that must be addressed under your MS4 permit. There's others beyond that.
So the 10,000 square feet versus 1 acre issue. Am I correct that a party who wanted to fill in 15,000 square feet and said, I can't do the project without that, and in this location, it's not going to hurt anybody, would they, could they bring in a request for a variance?
Certainly, they could always ask for a variance, and showing good cause would be their task.
And I know for a fact we've not had any of those.
No. So I'll go on, President Bradley. The 10,000 square foot threshold, I'll just make note, from my experience at Rice Creek back in the day, when we discussed what should the threshold be, 10,000 square feet and the runoff from it, the rain event, is equivalent to about 2 or 3 dump truck loads of water. And so the thought was that that was a reasonable threshold in which to manage stormwater, make note of how it has potential impact on the neighbor, and further how it moves downstream. And that's where you get your BMPs for the landowner intending the work to be attentive to that.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't think you want me to comment, quite frankly. These conversations frustrate me because I feel, the process is what it is, and I understand the objective, but you have these communities reach out or respond to, whatever letter went out, and they share their thoughts, and then we just write comments telling them that they're wrong instead of having a robust dialogue, and that frustrates me. I mean, you all know what I do every other time I'm not here. The city of Blaine, we have contentious things all the time, but there has to be a way to communicate better. It's very frustrating to sit in here sometimes because someone says something that someone doesn't like, and then there's eye rolls and heavy sighing, and it just bothers me. I don't understand why we can't work through this. To me, I understand I understand the response here, and I would respond in person. Sit down with these people and talk to them. Don't respond on paper. I mean, quite frankly, you don't know. It's like with email and text, right? There's what you read, and then there's the intent and the tone. It's always misconstrued. So I personally don't like the process of, sending carrier pigeons with comments back and forth. Just sit down and have a conversation with these cities. If that needs to be a part of the process, have in-person conversations, because maybe there's anecdotal things that weren't included, or historically they have an issue with whatever one of these rules you want to pick on. So, I mean, I understand what we're trying to do. I appreciate it. We've had conversations several times about regulatory as an overall. For me, I don't like this process. I like communicating with people, not via paper or email. So again, I think tone gets lost. And then I think sometimes, communication's a two-way street. It's what we say and how we say it, and then how it's received. And I just feel every time we do something like this where we're writing back and forth, I'll pick on Circle Pines. It's just never received. Our intent as a watershed isn't to be adversarial. I think we all agree on that, right? But I think when we aren't sitting down and having face-to-face conversations and we're sending out memos and comments, I think they are received in that way. And so my frustration isn't with what we're trying to accomplish, it's the process in which we're doing it. I would encourage more in-person, face-to-face conversations, and if that means extra time on staff or extra time on us, I mean, I don't have boatloads of extra time, but I think communicating is a key part of our job. Is relationships are at the center of everything we do. So that would be my only comment. I'm not going to debate what Forest Lake said or didn't say, or Hugo or whoever else commented, or what the staff comments are in response. I just think it warrants a human conversation.
Thank you. I'm sitting here kind of going, I spent close to 50 years either writing rules, defending rules, or attacking rules. And I know that a large part of the rulemaking process is written comments. And so I want to give kudos to staff that they reached out to all 27 of our communities and said, and counties, here's what we're thinking about, tell us what you think. And so happens that like 3 of these groups have the same engineering firm, and that's why I think you see some of.
I beg your pardon.
But I
that's
think
not
you're
true.
making my point for me.
There are 3 different engineering firms and each from a different county. There's 2 engineering firms from Washington County, the engineering firm from Anoka, and the engineering firm from White Bear Lake. These are all separate organizations, 3 of them.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, if I could, I think you're making my point for me. I may have a differing opinion than you. I don't just, I receive
actually
your
agreeing-
opinion.
I'm actually agreeing with you, believe it or not.
I feel like it's okay to disagree here. I mean, it's okay for that. Just,
Okay.
there can't be pushback on every comment that's said by this body that someone else doesn't like. I mean, yes, let's dialogue it and let's work through it, but I mean, and if only 3 of the 26 or however many cities responded, then it sounds like that's only 3 meetings to have.
4.
4. So, I mean,
And this isn't the only comment period. There'll be another one. When
no,
the
and I
finalized-
understand that. I
finalized
just,
rules are out.
So my recollection, looking at Chuck, is that this process is designed to come up with a proposed rule. That's all we're doing, trying to come up with a proposed rule, at which point then we notice the proposed rule, and that goes to public hearing. And there would be an opportunity for parties, if they so cared, to come present to us orally, and would provide another opportunity for direct comment. If you wish for our staff to reach out after we agree what they should reach out with, we can do that. We should do that. So I have some questions about some of these, if I could. Let's see, number 4 is like 4. Site wants to develop, has not received any. Oh, this is the pre-existing water, banked water quality and storage capacity. That's something we have done. I know that we did that in Hugo. We've done that in Centerville, I believe, with their regional, holding bonds that they've used.
New Brighton.
And New Brighton. So, I mean, I think we don't disapprove of that at all. We actually encourage that. FL6, will say, don't understand. So let's see what FL6 was. Yeah, I just don't understand what the concern is or our reply to it. Maybe you could help me out and explain what's going on there.
FL6.
Yes.
Manager Bradley, Board of Managers in FL6, the district is reiterating or commenting that the water quality treatment best occurs on the site or the location in which it's occurring. While there may be regional basins, those are typically developed in situations where multiple parcels will share and are under development at the same time. And it becomes challenging to insert a BMP to address these issues that aren't addressed on the site of the development itself. Typically, there's not a willing landowner to, I'll say, intercede in the flow of water and take on that water quality obligation, its maintenance, et cetera. I think to proceed in that fashion would put the district in a situation of looking to, I guess, condemn property for the water quality purpose. So the comment doesn't go that far, but it does. It's foundational in noting the closer to the site and where that stormwater runoff is generated is important. And I would turn to Chris if he has anything to add there as well.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add there is that it appeared that the last part of their comment was discussing weighing the impacts of nutrients on water versus flood control. So they seem to be trying to suggest that there is a decision point to be made whether to focus on flood control or water quality. But the fact is that nearly all the BMPs that we have provide some sort of function of both. So it really doesn't come to the matter of having to weigh that decision. It's something that can be accomplished more often than not with the same BMPs.
So in FL7, reply to FL7, is staff saying that this is a CWPMP, whatever, what are the full initials of this thing? A CWPMP issue, not a rule issue? If they want to fix it, they should go back to the CWMP and adjust it?
Excuse me, President Bradley, I'm going to ask you to repeat that, but just a moment if I might interject for our potential viewing audience or that. Can we bring these comments up on the screen from the board packet at all?
I can do that.
Okay, we'll have Chris do that. Sorry for the interruption.
No.
And also translate, please, CWPMP for the viewing audience.
Yeah, I'll do that quickly, and then to Manager Bradley's comments. CWPMP is the Comprehensive Wetland Protection and Management Plan. These were engagements with our municipalities to work under the mandate of the Wetland Conservation Act and make site or city and sub-watershed specific adjustments where there might be some flexibility.
Okay.
So your reply, are you suggesting that if they have concerns, they should go back and address them through the CWPMP rather than through the rules? What is our reply telling me? As your last paragraph, as it has been nearly 15 years since the CWPMP was established, there may be merit in reviewing the practical implementation of the plan. Rice Creek would welcome input from the cities of Forest Lake and Columbus regarding the implementation, in particular, provide specific examples of challenges faced by developers in meeting the associated rules, including buffer standard. In collaboration with cities can then consider more targeted modifications of the CWPMP, including buffer requirements.
Correct, yeah. To the flexibility that was built in under the CWPMP, we believe the rule allows for that flexibility already. It includes the engagement, the technical evaluation panel, which involves the state and making sure we're in alignment with the outcome of the CWPMP and the Wetland Conservation Act. So the flexibility already existing, if there's something of greater significance that they think needs to be addressed, we should engage, and we'd have to go back to the foundational level of the studies that created the CWPMPs and the adoption of them.
So it's not a hard no, it's a let's talk about it and see what we can do.
Correct, always willing to discuss, and obviously the pre-application meetings is an opportunity to look at alternative ways to do it, and things obviously get complicated pretty fast with the mandates we get from the state. So it's going to have to do with the hydrologic condition, the vegetation quality, stormwater BMPs that might be included in those buffers and that sort of thing.
So, okay, City of Lino Lakes B.1. They say this requirement about owning the land, this requirement can be a condition of being voted on by the board or a CAPREC item. Preliminary review and engineering comments would allow for design to progress without first needing to complete the full land acquisition process. That seems to make sense to me. Is there any reason why we couldn't make demonstration of a deed as a CAPREC item or other land transfer?
President Bradley, Board of Managers, I would say the district does that quite frequently. Certainly, we don't want a potential landowner, meaning I don't own the property, but them undertaking investigation of work on property that's not their own without the consent or recognition of the person who actually owns the land. That's how I'm reading that. So
This one is referring to public land acquisition. Municipal projects. So I can see your concern about I don't want a developer doing this,
right,
but
right.
you know, the city comes in and say we're in the process of planning. We don't yet own the land. I've seen it where it takes us sometimes a year or more to get the land. I see my lawyer wants to talk to me. Go ahead,
Yep.
Chuck.
I was going to say this was one of
Well,
our most recent.
Mr. Chair and managers, what I would say from my experience in conversation with staff is that the district already does this. I'm familiar with several cases where cities have come in and we've had the conversation about the status of their acquisition of the land rights and looked for something such as they have filed the petition for eminent domain or they've showed us a purchase agreement with the landowner and we've made that accommodation. So there may be something anecdotal here that is worth asking the city why they're raising it. Is there a particular instance? But I think we're already doing this.
So the real answer is yes. If there's a concern, let us know.
Right.
Okay. So White Bear Lake 1. So I'm mindful of the uninhabited garage discussions we had at our last workshop. Would an underground parking rule qualify under that new uninhabited, I can't even say it, building?
President Bradley, and underground parking. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's-
I would say it does. Chris would like to comment.
Yeah, Mr. President, I would agree with Nick if it was detached, but more often than not, these underground parking structures are attached to the
Oh, sure.
structure that,
It's a split level with it. The garage is half underground, if you will.
correct. And I think White Bear Lake's concern stems with, as I understand it, they have concerns that there might be risks of the underground structures of receiving water from either a groundwater source or some sort of overland source. And so our reply is intended to indicate that we really don't, within our rule, look at the groundwater risk because that's just really not in the district's wheelhouse expertise. But we do all look at potential flow paths that could potentially go to the underground garages. And when those flow paths are directed away from the underground garages, then we don't have that freeboard requirement.
I'm looking at White Bear Lake WBL2. I'm trying to understand my own notes. Give me a second here.
Mhm.
So
So-
while he's doing that,
Yep.
this first comment from White Bear Lake, are they asking us to add a requirement to our rules? And as a city, they could have it in their rules. Am I trying to putting who's responsible for what in my category here?
Sure, Mr. President, Manager Wynant, their comment actually appears to be simply a question and not necessarily a request or a suggestion.
Uh-huh.
I think it's just expressing a concern and wanting to identify how the district addresses these items.
Okay.
Certainly, a lot of cities have different requirements or rules related to groundwater with respect to structures. A lot of counties even will have rules with regard to that and identifying where the ordinary, I should say, the groundwater level is and having a requirement related to that with the low floor elevation, that sort of thing. But that really is something that is most typically in the domain of a city or a county, a zoning authority.
Thank you.
I finally figured out what my question was. It's a word use that I do not understand. It's in our reply to White Bear Lake 2. The last sentence says, however, the MPCA has published guidance on how common plan of development or sale is to be applied to cumulative work, both really and temporally. Is that a word? What does it mean?
Mr. Chair, I guess I'll step up and take responsibility for that word.
I could have guessed.
It just means when we're speaking, the intent of common plan of development is to avoid a loss of protection through a property owner segmenting work over time that individually they fall below regulatory thresholds, but altogether they should be managed properly. So cumulative aerially just means work in different areas of a campus or a larger tract of land.
Please do me a favor and take the time to write another full sentence that explains the concept. If I don't get it, I'm sure there will be other people who don't get it. So thank you. Those are all my comments and questions. Are there other comments or questions? Well, I think the answer for where we go from here is you take our comments and questions in consideration and put out a staff's view, which will give the board, when we have all 5 of us, to consider the final rules in a position to defend or deny the rules.
And Mr. Chair, what I've observed too is just how the process works. We've been talking about rule change or rule updates for a while. Patrick came to us with information. He sent it out then to the cities. The cities replied. Some of the cities replied. Those comments were then reviewed by Patrick and by our attorney and probably Nick and our engineer. So these replies are based on what we need to do, what we want to do, and conversations that we've had at this table in the past, as well as their experience as they're reviewing permits throughout the course of the year. And I just go back, by reviewing comments through the course of the year, Patrick has had a little side note of, hey, we should look at this one, we should look at that one. How does all this work? So there's been a system in place that's been in contact with the cities throughout the year, as well as several, a couple city-county partnerships. So there is conversation occurring with the cities, with staff, and written comments just formalize how we proceed with adjusting our comments. True? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, President, there is a motion here to authorize the staff to distribute the response and initial comments received on the 2024 rule revision. That's the action for this item.
Yeah, we could see if it passes. If it doesn't pass, we still have to do it. So that's
Okay.
my problem.
So,
Well, that's the motion I'm making.
Okay. I will second that motion. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
I'm assuming you are concerned that I'm not going to vote to move this forward, hence your comment?
Yeah, because there's only 4 of us.
Okay, well, here is what I will identify based on my comments and based on the way that this motion is written. This is indicating that these are initial comments. It also does not say that these are absolute, no more communication comments. I will vote in favor of this, but I would strongly encourage, if you only have 4 cities that have things, instead of guessing what the intent is behind their comments or requests for rule revisions, that we take the time to dialogue with those cities to find out what those issues are and concerns are. We can't say things like we have really great relationships with our communities if we're not participating in being that good neighbor and promoting those good relationships. So I won't vote no for it. Well, I'm not a monster,
I didn't ever say
Mr.
you were.
Bradley. Well, I think sometimes there's some dialogue that I'm just here to cause problems, and that's not the case at all. I want to encourage communication, and I want the watershed to have great relationships with all of the partners, including the other regulatory agencies. So,
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Any opposed?
Look at that, you got
How
all
about that?
4.
How about that?
Holy
Appreciate it.
smokes, lottery tickets for everybody.
Chuck?
Mr. Chair, just if I can, to offer 2 procedural notes for you. One is referring back to what you said earlier and to Manager Robertson's comment now. The statute has a very spare process for rulemaking. You publish the rule, you allow 45 days for written comments, you have a public hearing. It's always the board's prerogative to overlay on that a richer process. And it would be appropriate when staff brings the proposed rule to you next month, if you want to have a conversation and you want to lay out elements of the process that staff and the district as a whole should follow for the rulemaking. And then my second point is, which Nick referred to in his introduction, what's important as a legal matter is that the proposed rule as it's been drafted is all the things that have been generated internally that the thought is these are ways we can improve our rules. Then the cities have come forward and raised new ideas that weren't things that we're otherwise contemplating. As a legal matter, when the proposed rule is published, it defines what changes are within the contemplation of the board. And if a great new idea comes up in the middle of the process, you can't, as a legal matter, just say, okay, we're going to make this change too. If it's substantial, you have to go back and start the public comment period over. So what we've suggested is that if there's anything in these city comments that isn't in our proposed rule but interests you, and you think you may end up wanting to change the rule to address that, it's useful and important for you to let us know that before the proposed rule is published, and then when we publish the proposed rule, we can also publish with it notice about these other things that may be considered.
Thank you. Nick, what's up?
check register.
Thank you. Check
Yes,
register.
correct. Check register.
Manager Wyatt?
Mr. Chair, I will propose a motion, and then I also have an update for us all. So first, I'd start out by saying that I move to approve the check register dated June 26, 2024, in the amount of $720,446.76, and the June interim financial statement prepared by Redpath and Company. And I'll also note that it includes a 6/12/24 board-approved pay request. And you see that in the red highlights.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None.
And I would just update the board that, as you recall, a year ago, we invested funds in CDs, and we had laddered them. So one of them was 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. Well, the 1 year is already up. So we are having conversations with our investment partners, and we'll roll those over into another CD. And we'll let you know when that occurs.
Awesome. Any questions about staff reports? I assume we're next.
No. Manager Bradley, board, next on the agenda is the RCWD database demonstration. We'd like to show you the database that the district has.
Was there a vote on the motion?
That's what I get for having said, what on earth is that? There you
Did
go.
we
President
Great.
Bradley, did you
We-
vote on?
Yeah.
vote it?
You need
Oh.
to vote to pay the
Oh,
bills. We have a
okay.
motion, we have a second, now we need a vote,
Let's
sir.
do that.
Yeah.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, President Bradley. Next on the agenda, like I said, is the database demonstration. We'd like the board to be aware of the tools that we use at the district. We will share screen so you can see that. Give us a moment here for the technology. So about, as Chris is bringing that up on the screen, so we have a database. We purchased this about 3 years ago, and it is really the evolution of management of data. Perhaps you recall a Rolodex and all the business cards and that sort of thing, spreadsheets on paper. This is where technology has brought us, and it's critically important for the district, as you know, with the size of the district and the boatloads of information. We've had databases in the past, and this is the next in that evolution. Again, you purchased it 3 years ago. We really couldn't do our work efficiently or effectively without this tool to accomplish our mission. So it is an adaptable database. It can be customized by Houston Engineering to help us move through different matters and query data that we'd like to see. Currently, we use it for 3 primary functions: regulatory and the permit administration, the district facilities that we have on the landscape and their condition and the maintenance of them, and then also our grant programs where on the landscape we're creating BMPs, et cetera, that will be helpful for our goals. Allows us to, like I said, query it, access data, supports us in showing to our state agencies why they should consider us to qualify for grants and that sort of thing. This was very important for the city of Centerville to identify all the projects we had on the landscape for contributing water to Centerville Lake before they'd allow us for the in-water alm treatment. And also, obviously, at the end of the year, we do an annual report. We have to report to the state on various matters, and this is key in pulling out that information to answer to those entities. Kelsey's going to give you a little rundown here of the regulatory use of that.
Thank you, Nick. If we could, start with the map there. I think that's the most interesting part of the database here. We'll let that load. So as you can see up on the screen there, this is just an overview of the Rice Creek Watershed District. The district's jurisdictional boundaries are shown in red there, as well as some city and county boundaries. This map allows district staff to interact with geospatial data when we're assisting applicants with the preparation of their permit applications. On the right-hand side, we have a list of what we call reference layers that we can interact with to identify various regulatory requirements or considerations that we will need to communicate with applicants. Right at the top there, Chris is showing digits and structures. So it might be a little bit easier to see, Chris, if we zoom in just a little bit. But these blue dashed lines that you can see on the map there, those highlight the public drainage system within the Watershed District. And we have other features we can turn on and off, including pipelines and pipeline crossings. These identify pipelines that would cross the public drainage system, and then the individual crossings can be recognized by a red dot or node on the map there. Other layers that we work with are the district-wide model products. This includes showing Rice Creek's mapped floodplain throughout the Watershed District. That is shaded in a blue overlay there. And then Chris just turned on the hydraulic model nodes. These give district staff information on Rice Creek's floodplain elevations, and we can select a various node throughout the Watershed District pertaining to a certain property and communicate the regulatory floodplain for a certain permit application. This can be done during a pre-application process. Other just kind of interesting layers that we can look at that are used both during providing guidance to an applicant, but also during the review process include the resource area of concern, that when we turn that layer on, we can click on a certain area and it'll tell us which resource that area is draining to. That gets reported within the engineer's reports and can come into play with certain stormwater considerations. And another layer that I think is often useful when we're reviewing for a permit application would be the flood management zone. We can select that, check if a property is within the flood management zone, and communicate that to the applicant that they may have some additional reductions in rates when they're preparing their application. We can also search and filter for individual permit applications that have been recorded within the database. So if we go to the MS4 front layers, we can select, for example, 2024. If we click that layer, we will identify all 2024 permit applications. They show up as a blue dot on the map. And we can even search for specific permit applications if we'd like to. So in the top left corner there, Chris, could you just type in 24-010 for me? Thank you. We can click directly on that permit. That will take us directly to that location. And we can select a permit application node and click View Form, and that'll take us directly to a permit record. Within this record, we have various sections where we keep information pertaining to that permit application. And it's just loading here, but that first page will give us an initial description. This is just very basic information, including project names, the project location. It can give us details on the purpose of the project. We also have a people's page, which is a list of contacts for that application. This is where we can just quickly access all the contacts that are needed to initiate communication for a permit application. We can also track a permit's review status through the database. That will give us the current condition status of that permit application. And on this page, we also can track various review notes if we scroll down on that page. And that gives us features like flags and modifications that we can identify pertaining to a certain application. This information can be used later to generate reports for overall permitting for the year. In terms of the modifications, those modifications can identify different changes. One example is any modifications to the public drainage system. That information can be queried at the end of the year and then put into model updates at the end of the year. We also have a page for tracking correspondence. So if we have any discussions, we can just record those as they occur. We have a section for inspections. That's where inspectors record their inspections, and that is something that the permitting team can access and just check on the status of the most recent inspection, status of those. We have a surety and fee section where we record collected application fees. So also where we keep the surety register down below, and that tracks all sureties received and returned, Again, this database does provide us the ability to generate reports per year for that. And the last two sections there, we have a WACA rules sections. That's where we track any WACA applications that are submitted to the district. And this section can be used to generate a report at the end of the year as the WACA LGU. And finally, we have a BMP section where all proposed stormwater BMPs are recorded. We can keep information like the BMP type, the amount of volume that is provided, and that aids in MS4 reporting at the end of the year as well. And then I'll pass it off to Chris to discuss the rest of MS4 front.
Sure. The next part I'll talk a little bit about is district facilities. So this module here is to help the district essentially manage the work that it does in maintaining, inspecting the various district facilities. And I'm going to bring up one of them that we've heard a bit about at various times in the past. This is that E2 wetland structure that's at the intersection of 694 35W. And we have a lot of various information that's included in here, you know, the name, location of the facility. Because again, this is all background, you know, we get new staff that comes in. They aren't going to have that history on these things. It's good to have this one-stop shop so they can get some of that information right off the get-go and know exactly what the structure is without having to, you know, talk to somebody else that was there. We don't want to lose all that information, that institutional knowledge. So we have various information on that there. All this information is searchable, so if we need to find a particular kind of facility that has like water level control, we can do a search for that specifically. We can look at an inspection needs summary. That's a little further down here. This is a place where we can put in different things that we need to check for each time that we do an inspection, how frequently we want to do it. You know, so it says biannually. In this case, we want to determine the conditions of the sheet pile cap. We look for excess seepage around the weir. These are all important things, again, because you know, as we work with this facility, we get more information on what we need to look for. And again, it's better to have it written down somewhere so we can remember, kind of check the boxes as we're doing an inspection. Likewise, we have a maintenance needs summary further down here. We can identify some of the individual maintenance tasks that have to occur at different time frames. And then we actually have some of these items spelled out here. So we look at the outlet structure. We indicate where we need to remove debris from the intake of the structure. We identify that we actually have to grease the edges of the stop logs so they don't get stuck in there. Again, lots of information that we have in there. And then the operation, that particular one, we actually do pull the stop logs in the fall to draw it down and put them back in the spring. So we have this identified in here. Very important, you know, both from you know, again, knowing how we should operate this, but also tracking this so that if we have a question, for instance, with a DNR permit, we can indicate to them, well, this has been our operational structure we've had for many years now. A few of the other things we have in here, we have specific information on individual inspections. So we have one of these where we did actually just in March of this year already, where we identified that the condition was good. The vegetation condition was fair, not great, but fair, and the condition of the structure is fair. And again, those are things we want to track. We want to see if there's any declining conditions out there, and we have more specific information we can add to that. And actually, I'll pick this one to drill into. There's a lot of different information on this form. You know, is the outlet structure damaged? You know, we can check the boxes here or there of individual things that are customized to the structure, to the things that we need to watch for. And then you know, we have a note here, still sheet piling still needs to be supported by rock. So I want to make sure that we continue to have some of that work in place there, or I should say that material in place to help preserve the structure. But there's a lot of information here. Again, we have it set up so that we can have, you know, if there was a sediment basin, not in this particular case, but in another facility, we have the information in there already so that when somebody does an inspection, they don't have to really think too hard about what kind of information is pertinent to that kind of structure. And then we have a maintenance tab. Again, similarly, we have a tracking log of things that have been done to maintain it. In this particular case, there was cattails that were removed that we noted in there. And we actually have the expenditure that was done for that work, and we even have information as to the contractor that worked on it, so we can track that and actually keep invoices in here to preserve for the record as well.
Chris, as long as you're looking at district facilities, and since I've read a couple comments about the sand filters getting all mucked up, is that information up on, is that the kind of information you'd put on this?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
That is information that is intended to be tracked in here. Anything that we know of on an inspection or any maintenance item can and should be put into the system. And again, there's a lot of this that can be done right from a tablet when you're out in the field. That's the preferred method, but we can also input it when we get back into the office as well. If there's no other questions on the district facilities, I'll jump into one more item, which is the MS4 project files. And this is related to grants and other projects that the district is involved with. I'm going to start off with one here that I can use as an example here. This was a more recent one. A grant file for St. Michael's Lutheran Church. This was for a rain garden, again, one of our water quality grants. So we track that information in here. We have different types of projects that can be indicated here. Either it's a water quality one, a mini grant, or it can be in other ones. So there are opportunities to indicate other projects the district has a cost share in as well in here. And certainly this can be expanded upon to include even projects that the district doesn't have a financial interest in yet, or even something that the district is contemplating but hasn't actually implemented. All that information can be placed into this database here. Important thing to note is that we track these by water body. So this one drains to Langton Lake, and it's important again to be able to look at which resource concern these BMPs are going to be able to identify how many of them have been placed on the landscape going to each one of these water bodies. I'll move on to a few of the other items that we have in here. Contacts, again, this is our Rolodex that we have here so that we can be able to maintain contact with people during the life of the grant and into the future. We have information on the BMPs themselves. So in this case, again, it's a rain garden infiltration basin, and we have lots of different information related to this. We can actually categorize in a number of different ways what kind of BMPs that they are on the landscape. And again, those are searchable so that we can identify in any given year how many infiltration basins or how many of a different type of BMP there are. Very helpful to know and to track. Another thing that we can report in here is the pollutant loading characteristics, the volume of the basin we have shown on here. We indicate the amount of volume that's treated, the total phosphorus reduction. That's very important for those end-of-the-year reports that we're required to provide to Bowser and to the MPCA, showing what kind of reductions and accomplishments we've been able to do during the course of the year. So that actually saves a lot of time in the long run for staff, whereas in the past, if you had to look at paper copies or drill through a bunch of documents that are not organized electronically, it takes a lot more time to do that. Here it's kind of a one-stop shop. We can do a search and report it. Another important aspect here is regarding funding. We indicate the total funded amount, the total project cost amount. Again, it's important to keep track of that as a running total throughout the year. It makes it a lot easier. And then maintenance, another very important thing, identifying who's going to be maintaining this BMP into the future. Is it the permittee or applicant, or I should say the grantee, or is it going to be Rice Creek? That's possible too as well. So we identify who those people are, the contacts in there. Right now we don't have the contacts listed in here for this particular one. But also we have an opportunity to identify what kind of description they need to do for maintenance, whether it's weekly, monthly, annually, and describe what that work is. And I think that's all I have to show here, and I'll turn it back over to Nick.
Sure. Board of Managers, just noting, hope you like this. It's how we manage all the data the district has and fulfill our reporting obligation, but more importantly, keep track of all the good work that we do. So it's a critical investment. Certainly it needs maintenance. Those of you that utilize a phone or computers and that sort of thing, you know, those things develop bugs and there's new iterations of the material and that needs constant maintenance, just like your vehicle would. I think it's important to note again the geographic aspect of this, to note the resource of concern and what's happening in those areas. Obviously, we focus on water body. We have to know what water is moving to it. So real good tool for the district in completing its goals. So I appreciate you listening to that. And from there, we can move on.
Marcy's first.
Yeah.
Marcy, go ahead.
Well, I'm just asking you, this is procedural. So Kelsey, you send us emails, and what those emails are indicating to me is you've used this, and those permits meet all the requirements and they're good to go.
Correct. So most applications will be recommended for that conditional approval. So very close to good to go, if you say.
Okay.
Provided that they address certain conditions. But yep, those emails are essentially our engineers' reports, which are generated through this database, and it can pull various information and automatically generate that report for us, and then we just fill out some of the more details in the later sections, like the findings.
And then the next click in this is when we see on the consent agenda, these are permits that need a closer review by the board, or, you know, an action by the board. They've gone through this whole process too, and there are items that we need to be made aware of publicly, and then we decide if they're good to go or not.
Board of Managers, Manager Wynant, that's correct. Staff do have some delegated authority for I'll call them simple permits or elementary ones. Others require you to take note of them and make a decision. Certainly those have on additional requirements to obtain the permit and then stipulations for the applicant to be successful.
Great. And Kelsey, did you start before we had MS4, this database?
I did. I started when we had the previous database too, and so I'm seeing the transition to MS Forefront.
Yes. Looks pretty slick. Okay, thank you.
Tom? Mr. President, thank you. Very nice to see you here, Kelsey. It's always welcome to see the staff here, and I see Emmett's here too. I was reminded who you were. And good to see you here. I like to see the staff come to the meetings, and I'll recognize Tom's here. And of course, Teresa's always in charge. But
Always
I
in
have,
charge.
I have, yes, she is. I listen to Teresa. I have a question about this. One, who owns it? That, you know, historical reviews and databases are really important. I've had a lot of experience just trying to get ancient staff members here at the district to recognize pieces of paper that were 75 or 80 years old, you know, in the drainage businesses. So I'm wondering, I support what you're doing. I'm not against it. I just want to know who owns this and what's the backup for it, and how do I know that district's got a hold of it and this doesn't disappear when some engineering company is bought in a merger, or or goes, retires or whatever it is. So do you have thumb drives? I've heard of those things. I don't know what the hell they work. So how does this work, Kelsey?
Yeah.
Good question.
So pertaining specifically to I can best speak to the regulatory permitting department. We do also have another database. It's called Laserfiche. And so in terms of record keeping, much of our records are kept within that. I would say MS Forefront aids in other functions in terms of kind of keeping all the information easily accessible to generate into certain reports. And then things beyond my involvement that Chris and Nick could probably speak to in terms of taking that data and incorporating it into larger models and year-to-year reporting. So they serve two different functions. But in terms of the record keeping within the permitting department, we do have a secondary repository where that's kept. That's called Laserfiche.
Okay, and that secondary repository is in the possession of the district staff. It doesn't belong. It's not on some cloud place out in the world of internets that you have to access through the engineering company. It's something that we have directed and in ownership of it. And I'll let Nick answer that, please. Thank you, Bill, very much.
Manager Waller, yes, the district has a server which has all of this information stored upon it, and it's backed up multiple times. So should there be a critical failure, it remains accessible, recoverable, I'll say.
And the district owns it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's as you know, Nick, I'm a strong believer in paper.
Yeah.
And because that's my experience, is what I've found. Eventually you find the paper, and so as we go to this electronics, it's a marvelous system. I'm awed at the way it goes and the amount of work that can be done with it. Even though it didn't mention that the cattails that were removed were narrow leaf, no doubt, or an invasive species. But I'm concerned that, from my experience of many years of dealing with the Watershed District, decades, that when you have staff turnover, and they always seem to know more than what the people that lived on the property knew, or understand, this communication factor, and to dig those records out, and how they're going to be accessible. Because what I see with this system is no electricity, no records.
Yep. Board of Managers, I would say with a lot of things, no electricity is going to cause major problems. However,
We have backup electricity, don't we?
yes, we can get the hamster on the wheel and get things up and running. Laserfiche is the district's official repository. It's metal file cabinets, if you will, of all the district's records, and those do have multiple redundancies in its protection.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Nick, it's my recollection that we contract with Houston Engineering for at least some of our software related. Is it involved in this program or not?
Yeah, Mr. President, so the MS Forefront is a product that we developed, Houston Engineering developed, and we license it to all the folks that utilize it. So we have an annual licensing on that. And again, the data is yours. It's the Rice Creek's data. It's not our data. And we have that kind of all spelled out in our license agreement that we have. We also have Drainage DB, which is another product specific to the public drainage system records, and that's another one that we manage on your behalf. And again, it's your data, but we have it housed within our product that we developed to make it easy to use and resilient, so that it is preserved in the future.
President Bradley, I'll just make note of, you'll recall Whiskey, and Matt and Catherine spoke about that, which is another subscription or a tool by which we manage data. So these are very common. Lots of the watersheds use them, and we're feeling, to Manager Waller, very safe with the information we store there.
Anything further? Any further questions? If not, What's up
Nope.
next?
Next is our updates. Well, staff reports if managers have questions or comments.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just ask again, and I see Tom here. What's going on with those iron enhanced sand filters? Is it just too much rain? Is there a design flaw? What's,
Manager Bradley and Manager Wynant. I'd say there's a combo. This year we've been trying to repair some problems that have cropped up after 3 years of being on the landscape and dealing with the contractors that provide the pumping and control logistics, and we're getting those to the point where they're going to be fully operational this year or this rest of the summer.
because we use those as such an innovative practice. Now we're seeing what happens after
Yes,
years of use.
Manager Wynant, Board of Managers is correct. Iron enhanced sand filters are a specialized method. It's removing phosphorus, which is suspended within the water that's moving. Whereas when you take out sediment, it's bound to the physical particle. Here we got to chemically remove it, and iron enhanced sand filters do a good job of that. I think we had not to go into too much detail, but you did ask. So board, our Roseville iron enhanced sand filter in Oasis Pond. There's a trail over it. We had limited snowfall. It appears that the pipe froze and got a crack in it, so we had some difficulty there. So we need to repair those things and make corrective measures as needed and make sure they don't happen again. I think, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
From there, next on the agenda, President Bradley would be the July calendar. It's on 78 of the packet. Of course, July 4th, the district office is closed. In July, we don't have a citizen advisory committee meeting. Otherwise, pretty straight ahead.
All right. Any questions about the calendar? It takes us, I believe, then to the manager's update. Oh, administrator's update. Excuse
Thank
me.
you.
That guy.
President Bradley, Board of Managers, as you know, it's been raining. And this is the reason Tom is here. Staff work to maintain that public drainage system. We always want to keep its capacity available and it functioning when rains do come. When it does rain, we receive a lot of phone calls, of course. A lot of people seeing water and, hey, we usually don't see water here. And we politely respond. And I don't mean this disrespectfully, but it's been raining. And a lot of the existing drainage easements or floodplains then store the water as our system draws down over time. We're in a pretty flat landscape and those things occur. So we help to support the public in understanding how the system works and what reasonable expectation can be. And I'll take a little bit of liberty here ahead of Tom to just say that what you already know, moving water moves debris, tree limbs, that sort of thing. It may clog a culvert or cause challenges, and in extremely high water is not necessarily a good time or a safe time in which to get out there and do it. So we have to take actions as necessary to be attentive to that and continue to work to maintain its function after there's some drawdown. So with that, I know Tom has some more he'd like to share.
Yes, thank you, Nick and managers. With that, we've been keeping an eye on the normal flooding locations during this high rain event, and the system is working as well as it can, considering its built-in limitations of geography and topography. We did have one particular problem on ACD 102232 at the sod fields in Lino Lakes. And maybe, Chris, could you bring up the map and zoom in on the location?
Sure.
We have discovered a seeming culvert of deficiency. It's a private crossing on public ditch, causing a slowdown of water from the north, causing extraneous flooding on the north side fields, north of County Road 14, for those of you who are familiar with the area. And it was enough of a backup that the concern was great enough from the landowners that I used some mechanical means of pumping to pump around the slow culvert in the interim, as Nick had mentioned, just to relieve the immediate flooding and restore some of the capacity to this culvert. And that was successful, and it's dropped the water level by over a foot upstream. However, an old disagreement has emerged due to this pumping. The ditch in this area was consolidated in 2010 by order of the board, utilizing a functional alignment that had been developed by the sod farmers for their purposes. And we had, according to them, have taken their ditch and incorporated it into the public system without payment, and it's led to a series of confrontations over the years with that landowner. And so I received a text after discussing with them about pumping around their culvert and pointing out that the culvert was not functioning correctly. And though I can't definitively say that it is failed because I can't see it because it's underwater, they reluctantly gave me permission to, access the public ditch in their location. And instead of arguing about it in person at that time, I just let it go and said, pointed out that it is public, but then I asked our drainage attorney, Kolb, to send a letter reaffirming the publicness, that's word, the public nature of the ditch. It's not private, it's public. The crossing is private, and that, they may or may not have a failing culvert on the public system that we could find them as an obstruction and have them remove it. And we sent that certified to them. Excuse me. On the 24th, so just a couple days ago. This has been a ongoing, like I said, point of contention, and Manager Waller, recall, as he was on the board at the time.
Yes.
There was, when we first cleaned this ditch out in that section, we had to have a sheriff's deputy on site the entire time in order to do it. So I was trying to avoid that sort of confrontation again, if possible. We just wanted you to know in advance in case you've received phone calls or protestations of the private nature of this ditch. And I can assure you and provide you, if needed, with a copy of the order that demonstrates it is not private any longer. Any questions?
President, Tom's correct. This has been controversial. On this, I assume we're talking about the south side of the 14?
Correct, yes.
Yep. And it's a way that it's involved in that the Department of Natural Resources have allowed these farmers to use the system after they altered it. And out of respect for them, I mean, they altered it because they got frustration of not getting government to fix it for them. And so they use it also for their irrigation source. you know, they're kind of the first time we used the quote reuse, I call it irrigation. So we'll work forward. There's other controversies with this piece of property in Lino Lakes right at the moment that are much greater than ours. But if that's the only emergency that we've heard during this rain event this spring, that's very good. And I hope that you can continue on it, solving it that way.
Yeah, President Bradley.
Yeah.
So thank Tom for that and informational to the board. So I'm glad Tom was able to share that situation. I have a couple more updates here. I'll just note for ACD 102232, the Pine Street culvert, we had intended to move forward with that maintenance of the system, which we continue to press forward there. I'll let you know that DNR has identified that we should do a vegetative investigation for rare and endangered species.
Did they have a culvert?
Replace a culvert, yeah.
Okay.
We believe a little bit broader view here is important. We believe there may be an exemption under the law that's applicable and such, and we're engaging Houston engineering consultants, et cetera, to resolve that and move forward. I was at the summer tour yesterday. I'll note at the morning's Minnesota Association of Watershed District Administrators meeting, Marcy gave a nice presentation regarding Clean Water Council. Clean water funds, about $50 million came from that from 2020 to 2024. Good chunk of that, about 49 million, is actual projects on the ground being completed. You know that the district's been the recipient of those dollars many a time. Currently in play, we have our Highway 61 ponds and studying those. Clearwater Creek JD3 study is one of those, and we have a couple others in the hopper applying this year. Matt also did a presentation at the Mod Summer Tour, did an excellent job. And I'll leave Marcy already mentioned the quarterly treasurers meeting, et cetera. So that's my update.
Okay. John, did you have an update?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I attended the summer tour yesterday also, and yes, Mr. Koshin did a wonderful job, and I think Mr. Tomzak has some film of that. He was going to take a few films so you can watch. There are other things. It was an interesting experience for me to go back to Bandana Square, as they call it these days. It's the forward Northern Pacific steam locomotive shop and passenger car shop. And so I've to see the change of it over the years from being kind of a shopping center to now it's kind of a medical facility more than anything else, and a hotel where we used to keep the business cars for the grand poobahs of the Burlington Northern. And so it's very clean. It was never that clean when I was there before. Anyways, I did check White Bear Lake's outflow because we have had a lot of rain, haven't we? And guess what? It's not flowing. It's not yet. And so it's come up. I also drove by the sand filter over on Bald Eagle, and that would look like it was functioning quite well. It's flooded and it isn't bare as it was in the other years before. So that point of view. Other than that, Mr. President, I might, if I'm curious, get up early enough tomorrow morning, I'll go down and listen to the Minnesota Watershed's Executive Committee. There's always some good humor to listen to that meeting. So,
RC?
Minnesota Watershed, I would concur that Matt did a fabulous job. He's got some great carp humor cartoons, so he keeps everyone engaged. I am going to go to the tour after this meeting and catch up with them. And I would agree with John. It's wonderful to see staff here. I know we have new staff, so as often as we can get them to present and be present at these board meetings, I think is a great thing. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Roberts?
No, sir, I'm good.
And I'm good too. So motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
No opposed.
Recording stopped.